Hello and welcome back once again to the Broken Past. Today we're going to turn our attention back to this Game Boy Advance that we bought and fixed up about 6 or so months ago. If you'll recall, it kind of came in pretty rough shape and a pretty beat up, scratched up shell. The power switch needed a little bit of cleaning, but overall it wasn't too bad to get working. You know, it's been a pretty good system since that point, but it does have one flaw that makes it not the greatest system to use. Let me turn your attention real quick to this guy, see if I can get them both to fit in the video here. Now, I didn't actually do this one. I picked this one up aftermarket from a different seller. Somebody was selling this with an AGS 101 screen for cheaper than it would have cost me to buy the screen and do it myself. A nice little Dragon Ball Z shell here. But if we turn both of these two on together, turn the volume down here, we'll see our regular screen and our AGS 101 screen. Apologies, I got some reflection going on here. I have trying to do a new lighting setup, so there's a lot of glare on these screens. But we can see here, if I get to a decent display here, we can see a clear distinction between the AGS 101 screen and the original screen. And it's kind of hard to tell because of how bright it is in here, I guess. But the AGS 101 screen is much brighter than, obviously, the non-backlit screen. So what we are going to do today is tackle replacing this screen with not an AGS 101 screen, but a FunnyPlaying IPS V2 screen. The V2 fixes a lot of issues that the original version 1 had, and that was some of the screen tearing, some of the diagonal, I guess the way that it did the buffering on the display. I'm not fully sure the technical details, but the V2 fixes, it's supposed to have fixed all of that. So picked one of those up. It's been sitting in my room for a little while, ready to be installed in this guy. So we're going to take this one to the next step and replace the screen and see if we can make this that much better. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I'd gone back and forth if I want to do it or not, but the V2 screen, and probably even the V1 as well, comes with a separate, let's go ahead and get all these pieces out of here. Comes with a separate glass display lens. The reason for that is it's going to be probably hard to tell on here. If you can show it on there. But the display is actually a little bit wider and a little bit taller than the original one. Now, that's not really that big of a deal. It'll work just fine using this other lens. You'll just miss some of the pixels around the edge. And I know some people prefer that over this one, which I had read this was off-centered, but this looks like it's pretty well centered. So maybe the V2 is not off-centered either. But either way, I'm going to replace this plastic lens with this glass lens to give me the full viewing area, just to make sure that we get the best experience possible, I guess, out of it. So we have the glass lens. Unfortunately, it doesn't have, the Pokemon decals or details and stuff on it, but that's okay. We'll deal without those. We have that. We also have, just off screen, we have some of our spacers that are going to go into here that are going to help us to align the screen properly. So we have those. We have our sticker sort of alignment piece for the inside to hold the screen in place. We have our ribbon, which functions for both the 32 pin and the 40 pin displays. This one here is a 40 pin. So this will work for both of those. And of course we have the display itself. I guess as well as we also have some cable that it came with, some wiring for controlling the brightness. There's a select and left and right to help control the brightness, so we're going to go ahead and install those in here as well. So what I want to do is get everything torn apart, attach the screen to the Game Boy Advance initially to make sure it's all working, and then we'll go through the steps necessary to do a full-on screen replacement. So with that said, let's go ahead and take this thing apart and get it ready for the new screen. And I love these Game Boy Advances because they're so easy to get into and work on. If you haven't seen the Game Boy Advance shell swap video, I'll kind of go through the process here real fast as we go along. We have, actually this one came with all 6 Phillips screws. I believe the original shell has 2 Phillips here, and then these are all tri-wing, and this one down here may be tri-wing. I don't remember if this is tri-wing or Phillips screw, but in this case, they're all Phillips, so I actually don't need my tri-wing screwdriver today, which just makes it a little bit easier to work on. So since this is an aftermarket shell, it's going to have a different set of screws than what the factory shell would have. And as always, when you're taking these apart, you want to keep an eye on where each screw went. So when you go to put it back together, you know where they all go. And in this case, it looks like they're all the same except for the one under the battery compartment. We'll take the back shell off. Set it off to the side because we won't need that for a while. Take our grips. And our shoulder buttons and slide those out. So from here we have 2, sometimes 3 screws. I think pretty much everyone I've worked on has had only these 2 screws. Occasionally there's maybe a third one in there. So pull these out. And we also need to make sure, so we'll go ahead and pull the power button out too, is we need to remove the 2 tabs up here for the display. And they just slide up and kind of lock in place. And the whole board can just slide up and out. And while we're at it, we're going to also go ahead, just for now, pull all of our buttons and membranes out so they don't get lost. We'll also go ahead and do our little light bar there in the corner. And our buttons. And while we're at it, we'll also go ahead and get this screen out of here. If you've got an original screen or original shell, this might be a little bit more work than this, but if you just kind of twist it back and forth, it'll break the adhesive on the back side, and it should come off pretty easy. And of course, we'll save this down the road if we ever find another Game Boy Advance that's got a broken screen. We'll have this one to replace it with. So I'm just going to set this off to the side. And it's going to leave us with the front faceplate. Now before I look at this faceplate, I do want to test the screen and make sure everything is working well first, just before we get too far along and find out the screen's broken or there's some other issue. So I'm going to set this off to the side for the moment. We're going to turn our attention to the screen and the ribbon cable. And the screen does come shipped with a little bit of a screen protector, so we're going to leave that on there for now until we're all ready to put it all in place to avoid as many fingerprints as we can getting on there. So if we look at this, we've got 2, I'm sure how well those will show up on the video because they're so tiny, 2 small connectors that these 2 are going to go together, and they fit a will snap kind of into place. Don't put a lot of pressure on those. They are still pretty fragile connectors. I'm gonna sit those in there. And then, actually, let's do it this way. Flip it upside down. And in my case, I have the 40 pin. As you can see, it shows up in focus. There's a number 40 right there on the corner. So the 40 pin connector. So this is going to use the wider of the two. And when you do this, the connector, the gold plates face up towards you. So we will slide that in there. I think we can get away with not latching the connectors for now. So we're going to do that. So we're going to flip the whole thing over. And take out our button pads that got stuck on there. This kind of gets a little bit squirrely to try to do this, but I'm going to sit this in place just so I can test this screen. I just want to make sure everything's good to go first. So grab my batteries. Drop them in place, again very carefully. Flip it back over. Grab my tweezers and turn it on, and we should have a nice backlit screen. And we do. So yeah, a lot crisper, brighter screen than the one that it came with it. So this is looking good so far. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Flip it back over once more. And get this out of the way for a moment. Go ahead and pull this out because we don't need the board for a while. Now becomes kind of the trickiest part of this process, and that is getting everything trimmed down in here so we got proper space for the screen, for the ribbon, everything else. First thing I'm going to do is just sit this in here and kind of see if I can show it in the video. If the screen sits in here like so, we've got a couple issues. One, there's a lot of play in the screen going on here. So this is going to be our first problem. Our second problem is, as we were saying here, there's going to be, it's not going to fit very well centered in this display. And I keep debating to myself if I want to look at actually replacing that with a different lens, or if I want to leave this in here. And I've gone back and forth. You know what? I think what I'm going to probably do for now, I'm going to kind of shift gears, I guess, in the middle of this video. And that is that I'm going to keep using this plastic lens. You know, I've already got an AGS 101 screen system here. And this is more so just for an informative video. I probably will not play this one as much as I will play this one, unless the screen is so much better. But I like having, you know, the decals of the Pikachu and everything else already on the screen. I'd much rather have this. So I think for now, I'm going to leave this one as is and just worry about trimming this to fit the screen in place. But before I do that, I am going to actually probably go ahead and pop out this other lens just so when I don't get any pieces of plastic stuck somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this out real fast, hoping I don't break it or that's going to change my direction again. we didn't, so that's good. And again, you can also buy these shells pre-cut, pre-trimmed without these pieces down here, with the body of the inside already cut to size. I'm not going to worry about that, and usually it's not going to be too bad to do. Trimming this is going to be pretty easy. The hardest part is trimming the inside of the screen to give yourself enough room to see it on the new lens. But even that is really not that big a deal. It doesn't need to be perfect because the lens does have that bit of a masked black area around the outside that will hide any imperfections when you're trimming this part of it out. So, but I'm not going to worry about that for now because I want to keep using that Pikachu or Pokemon lens. So I'm going to leave that as is. And instead, I'm going to get my side cutters here, my flush cutters, and I'm going to work on trimming some of this inside screen out. And that's just going to allow it to sit completely flush against the inside. So when it's all put together, there's not any weird light gaps and whatnot around the edge of the screen. So I'm just going to work my way carefully around the edge, trimming everything down until it's flat. We're going to keep this raised area here. The AGS 101 screens require this to be trimmed out. We don't need to do that with the IPS screen. So we're not going to worry about that. And instead, we are just going to go through here and try to cut this down completely flush. And we're also going to cut down on, it's kind of hard to tell in here, but there are some bumps, some raised pieces here and here. We're going to cut those down as well for a little bit of space. I'm not sure if we need to or not, but there's also a couple tiny bumps over here on this other side. So I'm just going to cut a little bit of that excess off too. All right, so lastly, they also recommend, don't entirely know how critical it is, but I'm going to do it anyway, and that is, let me sit this in here, and if we assume that this should actually be slid all the way to the right side, and that is because this guy here should fit in there. I'm going to help hold it into place. I'm going to see if I can shave just a little bit off to make that fit in there still. But what also needs to happen is this connector here is going to flip up and over. And if you can tell, if I can get a very good enough angle to show that, that's going to sit about right here in the middle of the select button. And we want to make sure that we don't have any pressure on that when it's all put back together to risk breaking that connector. So this is going to have to be ground down just a little bit as well. I don't know. I was kind of hoping not to have to grind this down. I might end up having to go grab a Dremel and do that just to make sure there's enough room. But we're only talking about 1 millimeter or so, maybe even half a millimeter that way. I don't think that's, for me, that's not going to be terribly critical for this build. So I don't think I'm going to worry about that for this build. But what I do need to do though is still cut that notch out of there. So just like before, taking the side cutters, I'm going to work on cutting that down. So I actually think that might have just shaved off enough of it too that I might be able to get that acrylic piece in there too. Let's clean up a little bit more, this little corner here. Probably also goes without saying, X-Acto knives, or the blades themselves, are cheap. So grab yourself a new blade before you do this, and you can try to get it as smooth as possible. You can also go through here with a Dremel or something afterwards if you want to. Again, this is more of just sort of a, I guess, a how-to. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what I will do while we're in here is take a little bit of isopropyl and just clean the inside of this, get some of those chunks out of there that I've cut down. Kind of also help to show where I might not have smoothed it out quite enough. So clearly on this side here, we've kind of compromised the structural integrity of this button, but that's not a big deal because when we have the start and select buttons coming through here, as long as we keep this peg intact, so make sure when you're cutting around this, you don't accidentally break this peg, everything will still function just fine because it still has enough integrity in the actual pad itself. We show that this will still work fine. So at this point, we're going to start looking at what we need to do to get it all put back together. Again, if I was going to use that glass screen, I would take a file or a Dremel or something and I would go through here and open this up. Primarily, I believe the right side and the bottom side is what you'll want to focus on cutting a little bit out of, but I'm not going to do that on this one. What I am going to do is, first of all, I'm going to take the replacement screen gasket, I guess, and go ahead and sit that in here. This is the first step. Let's get that all lined up in there. Just gonna check my fit again here. Make sure everything's looking okay. So I don't think I'm gonna worry about that side for now. Now this other spacer here is going to sit on the bottom, and it's going to sit in here and kind of help hold that part of it into place. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm really trying to decide how much of this I want to cut off and how permanent of an installation I want to make this. You know what? I think that's fine. We'll make it permanent. I was thinking about only cutting a small portion of the window. That way it's a little bit easier to get the screen out. No, it's all right. We'll do it all. So pull the gasket out. We're going to take our acrylic spacer here. Yours might come with a 3D printed spacer. I'm not sure if those are all just V1 or if it does V2 as well. But in my case, I just have these little guys. Or the one, I guess, since I'm not going to do the other one. And that just goes in to help guide the screen into place. Now again, if I had trimmed some of the right side, I would do the same thing. I would put this one here on the left. And actually, I think I can squeeze it in. I did a quick test, had it sitting in there, and then I tried sliding this in, and it does fit, but it puts a lot of pressure on this, and it was making me nervous, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to check one more time, because at this point, once we put the screen in, there is no turning back because it's going to be in there too tight and you're going to risk breaking the screen trying to get it back out. I think we're okay. And unfortunately, again, since this screen is going to be bigger than the space, I need to make sure I take the screen protector off first. Otherwise, there's going to be no way to get it off after it's in place. So we are probably going to have to do a little bit of cleaning with our fingers or with a cleaning cloth afterwards and get our fingerprints off. So I'm going to try to just line this up as close to the side as I can. And there we go. What I'm actually going to do too, while we're at it, is, let's keep that upside down for the moment. I'm going to clean my finger smudges off of this lens real fast. We're going to go ahead and install this. And hopefully I got enough. Hopefully I got all the fingerprints and stuff off, because this is going to kind of be a one and done. Because now we have both the screen attached on the inside as well as the screen lens attached on the outside. So there's not a lot more now we can do to move anything around. Now we're going to start beginning the process of reassembly. First thing we need to do at this point is reattach the ribbon cable, which in hindsight may have been a little bit smarter thing to do before I put the screen in. It's a little bit harder to connect. It'll still go, it's okay. Now it does not look like we got a piece of, I was hoping we were going to get a piece of tape to be able to stick that on there. We do not have one of those. But actually, I guess now that I think about it, we can do that with a strip. This was the inside of that lower piece. So I think we can probably do that on here and help to hold the ribbon in place. So just take my X-Acto knife here and cut that out. And all that's going to do is just to help hold that ribbon in place. Just carefully align everything. Okay, so need to be a little careful. I did not line that up right, and that was going to be squeezed too far on the outside. But fortunately, the tape comes off of the screen, the shielding, a little bit easier. So try that again. I'm going to make sure that there's plenty of room on the upper part of the ribbon cable. There we go. Phew. That made me nervous for a moment. But now we can start to really see how cutting that tiny little notch out of the select button helps to give some space for the rest of that. And I'm also going to go ahead and start warming up my soldering iron at this point, because we're going to need to do a few more things. So this is optional, but we do have a left, right, select, and ground on there. And we're going to solder the wires to those. And what that's going to do is allow us the ability to control the brightness of the display, holding select and then using the right trigger or left trigger. There's also a ground, and we are not actually going to need to do anything with the ground. That is, I believe that was just something that was on there as a test point that they used when they created these ribbons. So we don't need to worry about that. Just the start, select, or just the left, right, and select. While we're waiting, get a little bit of flux on those. Probably could have also soldered that ahead of time. But I think that's okay. Make it easy to add a few balls of solder onto there. And then we're going to attach our wire. See if I can figure out how to do this around my new lights. I'm not sure how well it'll show in the video. I got a new lighting setup down here that has made it a lot brighter. but also a lot harder to work around. I'm going to have to work to figure out the best way of setting everything up down here. And another thing we need to do while we're at it, again, I think this is optional, but I did see some instructions online that said to do that, and that is we want to insulate the back of the ribbon cable from the motherboard that's going to be going on here. So we're just going to take a little bit of Captain tape and just cover this up. I'll probably do a small strip too over those, over the solder points on the other part of the ribbon cable. And probably doesn't hurt to do one on the bottom of that ribbon too. All right, now we put the buttons back in. And I'm not entirely sure the best way that everything gets lined up. So we are gonna learn this part of the process together, I guess. Try to keep this in view of the camera. All right, looking at this a little closer, it looks like our select needs to go. No idea how this is going to show up on there, but there's a TP2 right here. And that one is going to be for our select. Let's wiggle things around here. And that is definitely a very fine point to solder. And it looks like they have, the way they've done it is they've put this way here. So we're going to move right to the right side and left, obviously, or left to the right side and right to the left side since everything's flipped over. I'm going to get everything situated back in here. I think what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to go ahead and put our screws in just to make sure that that there's no clearance issues on the buttons or anything like that as we finish up this process. Make sure everything fits in there. All of our buttons feel good so far. The way it looks like they have set up for the left and the right buttons are, they've got it set up on the left of the two toggle switches here. So again, I'm going to move things around. Making sure I don't pull on any wires. Attach one. And apologies, I'm sure my hand's going to be in the way of this one. And two. And I just realized I forgot one step. Let's back up. Slide this out. Everything's getting a little bit tighter now since there's wires and ribbon cables and everything stuck together. But we need to put our light bar into place before we forget. And now we put everything back together again. And keep in mind, especially with these smaller or these aftermarket shells, that each time you put these screws in or take them out, they eat a little bit more of the plastic that they're biting into. So eventually they're not going to hold. So we want to try to do this as little as possible. Go ahead and set our power button in place as well. Now what I think I want to do is take a little bit more tape here and just use it to try to get the wires kind of tucked up out of the way. Just to make sure that we don't have any clearance issues, which means making sure that it's not in the way of any screws or screw holes or anything else like that with the batteries or any of that. And honestly, I don't know the best spot to put this, so I'm just kind of taking a guess right now. Just to get it out of the way. We're going to take our back, oops, before we do the back shell, cannot forget our buttons. And our grips. our back cover. And hopefully we have no binding and everything works. So before we screw it all together, let's give it a quick test. There we go. Okay, so we know it's working. Let's take the batteries back out. And let's screw all the rest of it back together. The one thing I did not check, I guess, was the brightness adjustment. So hopefully that works. All right, put our batteries in. Shut our soldering iron off before we forget. Put our game in. And let's give it a shot one more time. There we go. I'm actually going to turn the upper brightness, or the upper light off here. I'll turn this one off so we can take a look at this. So we can clearly see how much better the IPS screen is than the original screen. It's much brighter, beautiful screen to look at. Let's try the brightness adjuster and see if that works. You can see I realize I must be having an issue with that power switch. It's starting to kind of flake out. We're seeing some issues going on here. So hopefully this will work. Sure enough, getting dim and getting bright. Wow, that gets really bright. Not sure how well it even showed up on there, but I didn't even have it full brightness to begin with. So this is really bright. Yeah, like it's showing pure white on there. The camera is just about out of storage space. So let's take the brightness back down to about medium. See if we can get a consistent exposure here. Let's turn on the AGS 101 screen while we're at it. This one obviously also has a almost a dead battery. Both of which have dead internal batteries. And here we go. Not sure if the exposure is quite right. Let's take this down a little more. Now they look like they're about the same. Does that help? Well, I'll try to get this in post. But here we go. We can see both the IPS screen and the AGS 101 screen. If there's interest, I will try to do a follow-up video comparing the two of these together. But we'll set this one to the side for now. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in kind of a contrast and compare between the two of these. But for now, I'll shut that other one off. And we'll just look at this one. So as I said, I didn't get the bigger display or the bigger lens. I didn't cut out the screen. So there's going to be a little bit of dead space off to the side and off to the bottom. We can see that a little bit if we look down on the bottom of the screen and a little bit on the right side of the screen. I don't think I care. That doesn't matter to me, really. Again, I'm not going to be playing this one a lot, but unless you've got a game that's got those details right on the very bottom edge or the side, I don't think you're going to notice a difference. So, but yeah, from the darkest dark here to the brightest display, which almost just makes it white on the camera here. Awesome mod. Definitely love the screen, and it was a pretty easy process. Again, you could take it a lot farther. You could cut the screen out. You could get do some cleanup on the wall on this side. to make more room to put the acrylic and stuff in there. Or, you can buy a pre-cut screen or a pre-cut shell, or just use one that you have. Just do a little bit of trimming, and I think overall you'll be happy with the results. This looks gorgeous for, for the level of effort it took, which was not bad at all. Well, hopefully this video was helpful for you. Really, it was not that bad of a process overall. A little bit of modification to the shell to make it all fit, but it wasn't bad at all, and the end result is well worth the cost. So I will leave some links in the description for where I bought the shell, as well as where I bought the screen. If you want to buy one of these and do it yourself, you'll be happy with the result. So once again, thanks so much for watching. We are rapidly approaching that 1,000 subscriber mark. That just still blows my mind. I did not know if there's going to be enough interest in this kind of thing for 1,000 subs. So thank you so much for your interest and for your subscription to this channel. I've got a lot more stuff down the road that I'd love to do. Your views and your comments and your subscriptions to the channel helps give me the drive to keep making these videos for you. So thanks so much for your support, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.